Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare. So settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gills, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure? It's cultist coffee. What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is good to see you. It's great to have you here. Welcome to the morning grind. Welcome to the office. I hope you've had a good morning so far. I was up really early and working on, moving around YouTube videos. I'll show that to you here in just a second. Well, we have a very special morning grind today because this will be our second morning grind where we've had a guest on. We have Rachel Marshall with us today. We're going to be talking about game mastering, role-playing games, and story structure. And as you know, story structure is one of our favorite topics around here. So everyone, please welcome Rachel right now. Here she is. Oh!
Oh, hi. I'm just having some witch's brew.
Witch's brew. Yes. I got whoop. Look, here's one, too.
Nice.
Those were given out as part of the Cultist Season 2. So Rachel played Shay, so we may have seen her.
Yeah, a lot less cranky in real life, especially when I've got a big giant glass of coffee over here.
Let's see. We got Zero Blade is here with us this morning. Good morning, Zero. Robert is here. Robert has been working on his AI-powered text-based adventure. Says persistent inventory achieved if an item in a room's history and not an inventory, you can pick it up. I'll add some of the SRD equipment links to be generated as eligible objects to be
Nice.
taken.
Very cool.
This will prevent users from taking the walls or the stairs.
There you go.
Good morning, Lynn and James and Nathaniel. Good morning. Good morning. Lady of Pain is here. Micah is here. Brett is here. Yes, happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. And Sable Phoenix is here as well. All right. I've got a couple of links to show you. Let me share my screen. So right here, one of the things that I've been doing, we talked like 10 days ago about potentially are changing up the way that some of these things we've got are organized and structured, and I think that's a good idea. So I just established this for Table Talk. So I think that this channel is ultimately going to become more focused on the morning grind. Now, Table Talk is not leaving here because we'll still be, we still dual stream Table Talk to this channel. So if you're here on this channel, you'll get it for the time being, or at least the time being, but then also go over here to this new channel with it. So I have been uploading, and this is going to be better because there is so much stuff. I was trying to organize all of this, and I was like, man, it's difficult for me to even organize it. So it's, I know it's difficult for you to find all the different kinds of things that are on here. So this Table Talk is now going over here. I get the first 5 episodes of Table Talk. It's Lou Anders, Mark Tassin, Jeff Engelstein, Ajit George, and then Garrett Kopczynski. I think that I don't know exactly how you pronounce that. I'm sure I said that wrong. But he runs the Vampire LARPs.
Oh.
And they put together this gigantic, Nordic style theatrical LARP in New Orleans.
Very cool. Very good setting.
So if you are interested, please click that link. Didn't I just put that? Did it actually go out? Yeah, Table Talk channel in the link over here. And if you click there and hit subscribe to that, also the clips are going to go out over there. We've got clips as well. I've been uploading and uploading and uploading. So that's the new home of Table Talk. So please click over there and subscribe to Table Talk. Also, okay, so I am. I didn't get to work yesterday on getting the tavern, adjusting the known issues in the tavern because I've just been uploading videos and uploading videos and uploading videos. Although it's still completely playable. Have you seen this, Rachel?
You know, I want to say I've seen like ads for it or some things that have popped up for it, but I haven't seen it in action. This is really, really cool.
We've got the virtual tavern, which I am getting ready to play with, getting people to play tabletop games and role-playing games inside over here. So like if you go over here, this is how I got us set up over here online to play Hero Quest. Of course, we'll do that for dinner and a board game, but also if you go into our virtual coffee shop, you can sit down at a table with friends, and then I've got different games loaded in, but one of them is Hero Quest. If you sit down over here, you can play Hero Quest.
Oh yeah,
on the screen with your friends, or we'll get different role-playing games and things like that going. We need more people to be to sign up. So all right, so I tried getting everybody together, but we need more people in order to more interested people in order to be able to organize the games. So at the moment, we got Hero Quest. We got other games that we can play as well. I want to put Dominion in here. So if you want to play, I'm going to put a sign-up form, interest form, where this is actually just the interest form. So we probably need actually to double, triple, or quadruple so interest sign-up. I have been promoting it all except for on the stream. So if you would like to come and play with us, hit the interest form right there and sign up. And then that will, and then I will let you know. Probably an entire week's worth of scheduling. Let's try to get some interest. If you know other people who are interested or would be interested, click that, and then sign up. And also, please send it over to anybody anyone else you might know who is interested, and then we'll come up with a scheduling solution and start playing. Okay. So let me take that down. So Rachel just ran to get her charger. So what we're going to be talking about here is probably so. Well, you have to start someplace, and like I said, I wanted to start soon so that we can try working out bugs and kinks and things like that. That's the producer in me. I'm always moving forward, trying to move as forward as fast as I can. Hey, good morning, Dungeon Master. Good morning.
I'm here. I'm back.
Okay.
I did the cardinal sin of doing one of these. I thought I had full battery and I didn't.
All right. Well, we're here. Our idea was to talk about role-playing games and also story structure, especially story structure as it relates to role-playing games, which actually seems like a really popular topic around now. I've heard a lot about that. Of course, we've been talking about story structure in general a lot, especially on Table Talk, and we haven't really specifically talked about story structure as it relates to role-playing games. But it comes up with DBJ talks about that on his channel. I've seen interest on panels, interest on the subject for other panels for conventions and things like that. So this is something that people are talking about quite a bit. What do you want? You want to start with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. As my coffee tries to kill me.
Oh, wait,
yes.
we need to. I'm sorry. We need to breathe and sip.
Oh yeah.
Breathe and sip. So
Okay,
let's do that. Let's do that, and then we can get into the topic. So everybody, we've got your favorite beverage this morning. This is the mental health part of the show. 2 deep breaths, 2 deep inhales, complete exhales, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage this morning. So here we go. And now sip.
Cheers to that.
Now the morning is starting correct.
Ah. Right. And if you do it over your cup of coffee, it's just even better. Well, yeah, I guess we could kind of jump in. Just teeny tiny little background for me. I really only just kind of got into DMing. I would say a few years ago. I've been pretty much a career player before that. We had started a game over quarantine or just before quarantine hit, and we actually had this idea of circling chapters around the table, so each player had their own chapter. And of course, it was kind of one of those things where just by circumstance, it's time to learn. And I found I really loved it. I'm definitely still getting my sea legs with it, learning a lot of things. And luckily, I've had some very incredible patient players along the way who either have had experience DMing or just really enjoy the game. And I think that's honestly one of the best places to start with your story is like, who are the people that you want to bring into a game and bring into a world or a story you're creating? Because it's a pretty vulnerable place to be as a writer or as a DM. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And I would say the best place to start with incorporating and really paying mind to story structure in a game is just have your concept and keep it simple to start. That's kind of where I kind of start with that, especially with seeing some of these groups like Dimension 20 and Critical Role, and a couple others that are just escaping me now because I'm just excited to be here. There's always this very this is the base, and then we just build from there.
Do you want to tell people more about who you are in general? I should have said that.
Sure.
This morning.
Oh yeah.
Very slow this morning myself.
This nebulous friend who's just hello.
Yes, great to hear. Some people will know, but some people will not, because I've been on the channel before, and also I'm going to move some of the discussion from General Geekdom over to the Table Talk channel as well, since that's what it kind of morphed into. Right. So there's more from her on the channel and on Table Talk. But go ahead, let everybody know.
I was going to say I pop up there every so often, but I started working with Heath and Raiden Keep a few years ago on the Cultists. So when you go back and see the Cultists and see a rather dour looking witch in there, that's me, that's Shay. And we've just been kind of doing things here and there since then. But outside of Raven Keep, I'm a full-time writer, part-time voice actor, and part-time actor. And every now and then I make really good food. and and share it with my friends. But I love storytelling. I have since I was a kid, and acting and writing and voice acting is really just different extensions of feeding that need to tell someone a really good story, spin a good yarn kind of thing.
Where are you writing?
What am I writing?
Yeah.
I do work for Hoffman Media here in Birmingham. They're a Southern lifestyle magazine. So the thing that keeps the lights on is writing about tea time and Southern potlucks and whatnot. But currently what I'm writing is I'm working on a short novella. It's a horror story that takes place during when Spain was colonizing Central America. It's a whole exorcist thing that takes place on a mission. It's really fun in a really bloody, gory kind of way. Other than that, just trying to plan out the next short game that I want to run, and whatever ideas kind of jump in from there. Lots of notes, lots of journals with random ideas in them.
Okay, so one of the issues that we have, if we're going to add, it seems like on the surface of it, that a role-playing game should have some type of structure like a story, because a lot of games are going to follow something like some type of hero's journey, or intuitively seem like they should be following something like some kind of hero's journey structure anyway. You're going to start with these level 1 heroes.
Yeah, it's like, how do you tell one hero's journey across like 4 or 5 or sometimes plus players? Like, how does everyone get their own hero's journey in a group setting?
That is an important thing. Okay, so first of all, we got multiple people who are all supposed to be doing that theoretically.
Yeah.
And then we've got to span this over an unknown amount of time.
Right.
So there are 2 ways. So I mean, everybody, it seems like ideally would want to say, hey, we're going to span the hero's journey, and we can talk about what elements are there and which elements are inappropriate. But we're going to try to span this over 20 levels, which could be an entire year worth of play or more, depending on how often you get to play.
Right. Yeah, there's some groups that go pretty quickly, and then there's some groups that you'll kind of see them on like a documentary or an interview or just in life, just being like, yeah, we've been playing for 13 years and we love it. It's like, oh, cool.
Do you think that they've actually been able that story structure has actually carried over all of those games? I would say probably does not for us.
Right. It would change a lot. I think you would have multiple stories. Like, you're looking at something that's more like a trilogy versus one big story, right? Like, I would imagine these career groups, which if you do or ever have been a member of these groups that span years and years and years of history and lore, and sticking with one character or maybe cycling through a couple of other characters, good on you. Like, that is a marathon and a half. It's a lot of dedication. It's really cool to see. But I would imagine if you have been a part of that, maybe it's like an anthology within one structured world versus like where you have this sprint like that Heath and I are used to, where you get in, you get out, you tell the story, where there's that solid one story structure. So I don't know. That's the only way I could think about it for the career groups, is it's like you're reading a book series instead of one book.
I like the analogy to like an anthology.
Right.
I think that's probably, like, especially when we're doing like AD&D modules from a long time ago and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming in with different. There wasn't much of a structure between all the different modules. We were loosely, connecting. We kind of had an idea about, well, we'll go here and then we'll go here, and like which module will be played next. But there wasn't, I would say there was not any type of story structure that is arcing through there.
Right. It's like, okay, now my character is in this situation. My character's in this chapter kind of thing. I think that, I think when you are, I guess just for the purposes of like kind of keeping it pretty insular this morning, if you're doing your 1 through 20, you're probably, pie in the sky, 1 or 2 years of gameplay, just, and sometimes that's more of a schedule thing than anything else. But we're going to say our one story. I think when you're coming up with your one story, I really think you need to have a pretty basic foundation. I think if you overload your concept from the jump, I think it doesn't give you a lot of room as a DM, and I think it doesn't give your players a lot of room. Like maybe they can start with, oh, I can pull from this concept, but then it's like, can I maneuver around all of these different concepts playing into this foundation? I think that if you have your world and you have your, this is how we're starting ABC, it gives you room along the way to kind of be like, okay, now we've got, the rest of the alphabet coming into play, versus all of it up front.
I'm not as familiar with Critical Role and how it does this.
Mm-hmm.
Does it try now? Of course, they're much more regular, so they have that advantage.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But they've got the story that he's trying to tell, so they probably are trying to put a structure over an entire season.
Yeah. It feels like, from watching it, it feels like Matt goes in with a pretty just general concept, like, and then kind of lets the players almost fill that in. Like this campaign that they're currently on, I feel like in the first swath of that campaign, we had Laura's character playing a really big part of the main plot, but that's also been jumping around since then. Like it's jumped around to Marisha's character, it's jumped around to Liam's character. I think they've recently started putting in an arc into Talison's character, and it feels like these different arcs really inform the rest of the story. Like I think that, like, I try to go into games with my ending pretty much pinned down because I want to have a goal or a finish line for all of us to cross. But it's kind of like, how do we get there? And I think that a lot of his players really inform and pivot the path, like, circuitous as it might be, to that finish line. But he has an idea of the story enough to just be like, okay, we're going a little off the rails here. Let's kind of groove it back, but also let's let them keep playing. So that's always the impression I've gotten from it.
Brett says, I think we need a Heroes Quest reunion dinner and a reunion dinner and a board game with the Cultist cast.
Ooh.
Well, that's what I'm working. That's what I put out calls. I asked Rachel to come on the fourth pilot for the dinner and a board game in our new format. So hopefully, looks like I'm not organizing it fast enough for this week. Megan said she's available next week, so it may be next week. I've been trying to upload and change things. So yes, I think that's what needs to happen for the new pilot for dinner.
Yeah, and I think that timing's pretty good. We have Sidewalk Film Festival going on here in Birmingham right now, and it's pretty much become an all-week affair. So everyone's busy right now. I'm not going to be around for the weekend because I'll be there too.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never made it up to Sidewalk.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
I should, but I never. So James says people suspect that Critical Role is scripted, or at least the set piece moments are no clue whether they or not they actually are.
I don't think they're scripted. These are trained actors who have a really big background in improv, and they've also been working together for a very long time. They all know each other pretty well. I think that Matt does have his high spots queued up. I mean, if you've ever seen Behind the Board, whenever they do an over the shoulder, that dude has organization for days that I could never imagine. Like if you were to look over the board at me, I've got maybe some chicken scratch and maybe like, a half a sandwich. But I think that a lot of that, like especially those light and sound cues, I think a lot of that's also owed to Marisha and her team, since she's pretty much in charge of that set design, or not set design, but I'm pretty sure she's like the set coordinator, if I'm remembering right. And I think that's also just from years of knowing each other and working with each other and just having that improv background, that yes and background. But I mean, I do believe there is some communication between DMs and players, but I do think that one of the reasons they're able to play so fluidly and naturally together is they've just been doing it a while.
Sable Phoenix says Critical Role is a masterclass on most DMs aren't going to be able to steer a group so subtly yet completely into something that feels like a pre-planned story. Yeah. But it helps. This is what you were just talking about. This group is a bunch of theater improv actors as well as voice and film. They play along most of the time, at least.
And I think that actually kind of goes into something I was thinking about. Like once you've got your players, I think that yes and rule. I mean, obviously, if you're like, this would actually make me really uncomfortable to do for my character. So obviously, those politics aside, this is a very broad stroke. I think that's kind of one of the easier ways we can talk about this morning within our time frame. Is the yes and rule is so important, and DMs love it. Like there's this game that I'm currently running with my friend Josh. Josh, if you're watching, hey. We have some brilliant players. We actually had a player who just had to exit, but he would yes and practically everything. And it set up this entire like chapter, this story arc that we were kind of, like loosely eyeballing, but like he just yes-anded his way into a zombie outbreak story arc in this city that we were originally going to have maybe as a home base, but then there was a zombie outbreak. So now that's changed. But that also changed the dynamic of the story we were telling, and it affected so many characters because one character was a local of that city, and it became about how do they get their family out? Is their family safe? And as a DM, it was really fun to pivot with that. I remember there was one inciting incident in one of the sessions where I was like, yes, this old crone hands you a candle. And she's like, when you can spare a moment, light a candle for, say, a prayer for the father who's wound up being one of our bad guys. And the player was just like, okay, and just lit it right then and there during stealth checks. And I was like, oh, okay, like you're doing that now. All right. So I think that yes and is just so critical as a player, and we just love it. We eat it up so much, and all of these things that were created from those decisions create inciting incidents. And I think that's to your point about subtly guiding your players is you want to give them something that would incite them to action. Like with the hero's journey, there's the call to adventure. And so you'll see that with Luke Skywalker, like going to save a princess, but he's the reluctant hero, that kind of thing. You want to have those calls of adventure, coax your players away from the tavern, away from the campfire, and get them involved and have them make those personal connections to that inciting incident.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got the writer's journey here, and I think we can take a look at some elements of it that work and potentially don't, although for a role-playing game. But, I want to have a conversation sometime about specifically what story is. Mm-hmm. Because it occurs to me that it seems like the role-playing games across sessions, and we can talk about structure within a session, and then across sessions, because another alternative to structure is to say, well, we're not going to be able to do a story arc across multiple sessions. We don't even know how many sessions there's going to be, but we can structure potentially within a single game. And we talked about, have you ever played 10 Candles?
I haven't played 10 Candles. I know about 10 Candles, but I haven't played it.
We looked at that game on the Morning Grind, and everyone seemed to be big fans here because it structures. One of the reasons people were big fans of it is because it structures the game so well internal to one session, which I have been still turning over in the back of my mind about how you do that potentially with other genres to structure something within a particular, like if you're going to tell an action, this is like the equivalent of an action movie, like Indiana Jones counts. Like, and you got 3 hours to sit down and play, and you're going to be session focused. How do you make sure that you structure a game inside that 5 hours? 5 hour of the 5-room dungeon is part of that. So other people have had different expansions on that. But what a story is important, because you can also just have, when you're writing the story, you don't want it to be just a bunch of events that are chained together. That's not a story structure that's going to be satisfying. There's going to be more to it. But it seems like oftentimes a bunch of events that are chained together is what a D&D game is.
Right. I mean, there's that one of the golden rules, and it's one that I really subscribe to, is conflict drives story. I also think connection drives story, kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier about how do you personally connect to these moments in the game? How do you personally connect to your other players too, which that's a whole other thing. And I'm happy to get into that. But for this, I feel like your conflict drives story. You want to challenge your characters, you want to challenge your players. And that's one I always come back to. So it's like, yeah, you're hanging out in this village, it's really nice, you can rest, and then it's attacked. It becomes a moment that defines these characters, another moment within a long string of moments. And I think that's another place where you can also set up your structures. It's like, what if they're not just bandits? What if they're actually working for this cult that serves this other like warlock who serves this lich? And like, it just keeps on going. And so I think conflict is really important, especially that really organic conflict that can come up from settings. That's one of the things like I come back to.
Let's see. Now, I believe we brought up the idea, and this is what Sable is responding to, that having the players talking to the game master outside the session to see where they want to go.
Yes, absolutely.
We did that a little bit. Most of the time, that seemed to be about what items you wanted to acquire.
Right. I think that, having having the inventory is important. I do believe very much in communicating with your players. Because for me, going in, like kind of what we talked about, how having this broad stroke, this foundation that's rather basic, so you can kind of keep building the cake up from there. A lot of that depends on your players. They should be able to share ideas, concepts. Obviously, equipment they want is important too. But yeah, I think that communicating with your players is really good, and having those really like malleable backgrounds, like, oh man, just a player with a solid background is wonderful, because like you might go into a game with an idea or a concept, and then someone's like, hey, I was in this prison for 10 years and now I'm out and I'm figuring out what that looks like. And it's like, oh, a prison, you say? Let's play with that. So being communicative with your DM is really beneficial for everybody. Hopefully you have a receptive DM. Hopefully you have receptive players. Sometimes you get shy players who maybe they haven't played for a while, or maybe it's their first time playing and they're just like, oh no, I just thought it'd be kind of cool if I had a talking dog. It's like, cool, let's talk about this talking dog. It's important. I think that a big part of the story are the ideas the players bring to the table. And that's kind of going back to the yes and from your players, is like, yes, please. What do you want to do? What are your goals? Like, what are your intentions for this game? And from there, it's for me, that's where the pieces of the story fall into place a lot more easily, is when players are very open and communicative and they know what they want for their character. Or if you throw them something in the game, they're like, wait a second, this was pretty cool. I want to keep pulling at this thread, et cetera, that kind of thing.
Some game systems lean into that more than others.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about this for a moment. What game system are you playing? Like Fate leans into that. I mean, there are games that have the collaborative structure built into the system, that this is going to be a collaborative thing rather than a something where the players are experiencing the world the game master built. Have you played any games like Fate where it's been geared around a collaborative story structure or storytelling?
Spirit of the Century did that, and that was really fun. Spirit of the Century, if anybody of you know it, awesome, glad you dig it. It's a pulp novel, pulp comic oriented game. So like think Tintin, Indiana Jones, that sort of thing. The Mummy, also a good adventure, like a pulp adventure or pulp comic kind of setting. And the way it works is when you're building your background, you build it like the back of a pulp novel. So you write your basic like paragraph about it, and then you pass it to another player and they write about how your character is connected to theirs. And then they pass it and they write about how their character is connected to theirs. If I'm remembering it right, it was a very long time ago. But the game also relies really heavily on the player's imagination. So if you're having a squaring off somewhere in a warehouse, you can describe what this warehouse looks like, but then they could be like, oh, hey, is there a cargo hook or some sort of like rigging system, because I want to swing that at the big guy on the catwalk that's fighting my buddy up there. And then they're like, yeah, sure, you put eyes on that. That's a +1 to your die or +1 to your result, that kind of thing. And that one like really heavily leans on collaboration for its backbone with your players. And it is fun. It's really fun.
Let's see. Dungeon Master says, with other people playing the main characters, I find it difficult to create a coherent storyline. I usually improv
Oh, I think it froze a little bit. For me, anyway. Uh-oh. Hello? Oh, are we back? Are we not? Are we frozen? Are we human? Are we dancing? I don't know why I'm getting a freeze on my end. Oh, hi. I think Heath has ducked off for a second. Let's see. With other people playing the main characters, I find it very difficult to create a coherent storyline. I usually improv situations and hope that the series of them and players' reactions and actions. Okay. Heath is locked. We can hear you, Rachel. Oh, it's just me. Cool. This is terrifying. Oh, well, okay. From what I saw from Dungeon Master, it can be difficult to create that coherent storyline. I've definitely had to improv a bunch of times. I have 2 characters in my current game. And if they're watching this, hopefully I'm not going to tip my hand too much. But we were definitely trying to figure out a couple of things to do with them. And me and the other DM basically kind of put our heads together about it and realized that there could be this one connecting thread between them. And we kind of went from there of finding that cohesion of threads between characters, or sometimes even like organically manufacturing that. Or curse these fat. You are now the channel overlord. It's my morning grind now. Yeah, I think that like having moments that can connect your characters together sort of brings them together to work towards a common goal. There was one inciting incident I did in a recent game where these characters became very enamored of an NPC. And of course, I was like, well, what if that NPC were to be recklessly kidnapped? And now they're all like, we gotta go find her. But it's also part of a much bigger story that we're telling. But we gave them something to unite about and go after together. And I think that between that and finding these threads that connect these characters, it is a perfect opportunity for improv. We're yes-anding the hell out of this right now. Finding those connections between the characters, finding those connections to how they can have something to care about in the game. They play ball a lot easier, not in like a manipulative way, but like you want to give them something that matters to them. And that's where I'll usually find that cohesion and that ability to parallel it with the game and eventually have that line that gets ever closer to the actual storyline finally meet it. It's really amazing how much players inform the game. And it's really incredible how when you do hit that sweet spot where everybody gets on the same page and is just like, okay, I'm dialed into this now. I'm dialed into the characters my friends are playing. I'm dialed into the DM's style. And now I can just kind of enjoy this game I'm in. And that's kind of where I find it a little bit easier. Kill your darlings or theirs, whichever. Yeah. Deaths and characters getting spirited away or kidnapped or taken. It's, tragedy can make us connect to one another and look for solace in one another just in real life. So having these incidents of conflict, of upheaval, they're they really do bring their characters together. If you pardon my staggering, I was checking the private chat to see if Heath was in there. And we're gonna also see if he's reached out in messages. So, technical difficulties. Let's see, back to our comments. If anybody wants to ask me any questions in the comments, I'm happy to answer them until Heath is back or we figure out the technicals over here. Thanks for your patience, by the way, and I hope you guys are having a good morning with us so far. Don't make me sip this coffee in silence. Andrew, good morning. You've joined me on the morning grind for now. Let's see, we're gonna double check again. We want to make sure we're not losing Heath. Is anybody out there doing their own game, like as a player, as a DM? Is there anything that you guys are running across? Reiterating, how many game systems have you DM'd, Rachel, and what's your favorite? Wow. Oh yeah, Spirit of the Century is really cool. And I didn't know that was the precursor to the current Fate edition. That's also cool. How fun. I have DM'd MURPG. I did that as like a play-by-post game. I did a Marvel Exiles game with that, which was really fun. I've also, over quarantine, when we were doing that rotating DM style, it was 5e. And other than that, I've done a couple of Changeling one-shots. And I would say, though, my favorite so far has been 5e. I've really enjoyed 5e. And, oh my gosh, that looks like my missing remote. Heath stole it.
You're missing remote?
It looks like my missing remote. I'm like, did you take my remote? How do you balance a good storyline and an unpredictable structure? The hero's journey is so recognizable. Yeah. I mean, really, you have to pivot so much as a DM. I think that is why having your general concept and making sure it's solid but flexible and open. I think that's one of the ways you can follow an unpredictable structure like playing a tabletop game. Having this more open concept and this open idea with an end goal in mind, I think it makes it easier to pivot with your players. So that way you're not like, no, we can't do that. Or well, not that, I know any DMs who've ever done that. That's just an extreme. But, just having that ability to just be like, yeah, let's play with that versus like, no, I've already got this set in place. We're going to need you to do something else. I mean, it's important to know your boundaries with your story as a DM. So I'm definitely saying not to sacrifice any of that, but you do, I think, want to build in that wiggle room, not just for your players, but for you, because I feel like you can crowd yourself out really quickly by not having that more broad approach with that specific end in sight. It's so much fun to see like the calculus of your players' decisions and movements and connections drive them to that point. And let me see what else. As Heath's getting settled in here, we've done the what's your favorite. We are scrolling.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Everything okay?
Yeah. All my power went out. My power went completely out. The entire house went. It's been a long time since that's happened, but the power went out. Well,
it knows.
Cameron has been on with me. That was like a year ago. It's been like a year since that's happened when the power went out. Except I was like, oh my God, it's way out. But then I heard banging from the other side of the house.
Oh my gosh.
Like, what is going on? And so I walked over to the other side of the house and there was like banging. Somebody's working. So I walked outside and there's a guy from Alabama Power. He's got my meter out and he's holding there's a work guy on the side. He said he had to change my meter because apparently it wasn't working or sending information back or something like that. So I walked outside and there's a guy that's got like my power meter in his hands. I'm like, well, I'm on a live stream right now. Fortunately,
they know.
He put it back
They're just
on
like, we heard you were doing a live stream, so we thought we just swing through. I like what PH is saying here. Perhaps there's a way to create the framework of a structure where the GM and players can collaboratively create. Depending on the roles, it can lean more towards one side or the other. And that's kind of what we discovered with the rotating DM thing, is that we would we were collaboratively telling this wonderful story. Like we actually just wrapped it up a few months ago. It was the Company of the Compass was our group, and they were wonderful. And the gentlemen that were all playing in it, they've all known each other since high school. And I was the new person, and we were still all just like such an enmeshed team. They're the ones I was telling you about that we were going to do Easy Six with a while back. So
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, that definitely, that was like collaboration, like perfect storm of collaboration. We all got along really well. 3 of us have theater backgrounds, which definitely helps. But you know, it's not necessary, but that is kind of like, I guess, a sidebar or coffee fueled sidebar is if you can either watch improv or like just take like a summer improv class or something if you can, because like just having like a basic knowledge of improv rules can really enrich your place at the table with your players and your DM.
DBJ brings up the idea. I had mentioned the 5-room dungeon. I got to get back into the flow of our
Oh yeah,
conversation
yeah. I
where
wanted
we
to
were.
get back to that because I was
Okay.
like, wait a second, what?
So the 5-room dungeon procedure.
Mhm.
So 5 is ultimate 5-room dungeons. Where, let me see if I can find a brief explanation of what every one of them, what they are. Because they're supposed to be like one location. What needs to happen inside a location? Because we can always create all kinds of amazing stuff and just tons of stuff for a location, but you've got a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
And so the 5-room dungeon format, room 1,
yeah.
entrance and guardian. So, and there are modifications to this as well. But
Puzzle role
so
playing
room 2,
challenge.
entrance and guardian. Something that's going to prevent you from getting. This needs to be a
Yeah.
reason why your dungeon hasn't been plundered before and why the PCs are here to do the job. Puzzle 2, room 2, puzzle or role playing challenge. PCs are victorious in the challenge room are now presented with a trivial task that cannot be solved with a trial task that cannot be solved with steel. This keeps problem solvers in your group happy and breaks up the action for good pacing. Room 3, trick or setback. Build tension. Do this by using a trick, trap, or setback. After defeating a tough monster, they think they've found treasure to achieve their goal. They're going to learn they're been tricked and the crypt is empty or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Room 4, climax, big battle or conflict. And
this
then
is just the Mines of Moria, by the way. Like, if anyone wants a pretty good backbone for this.
Reward, revelation, plot structure. So there have been this, and then also the cyclic dungeons. So there have been attempts to come up with structures internal to a game session, which I do really like. So this is what DBJ is working on, and the Heroine's Labyrinth.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, like I said, I'm pretty new to DMing and seeing the seeing more of the technicality and the structure behind it is pretty friggin' cool. So like you were going through that and I was like, oh shit, there's actually like names and steps for what I've already been doing. This is good. This means we're doing it right. And not just right, but we can do it better. So that's really cool. I just learned a lot. That's awesome. But yeah, you were going through it, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is sounding like the Mines of Moria.
The Heroine's Journey is the Heroine's Labyrinth is.
That's really cool.
It's fantastic.
No, I've got to check that out. The more you know. That's the other thing. Be receptive. Be as receptive as you can.
So I was going to bring up if we have the issue, we've got multiple people who have got to try to do something.
Yeah.
With their story structure. Collaboration is important, but there are certain things that perhaps, especially in the beginning of the hero's journey, that I think can probably be skipped.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you're on a time limit.
Yeah, suck it, Campbell.
You're on a time limit when you're writing a script or a play anyway. But for instance, the refusal of the call seems to be one that you do not want your characters to be doing.
No, if you can. I mean, you could have, the only thing I could think of, and this is like, again, coffee fueled knee-jerk reaction. They can refuse the call, but there could be a punishment built into that. Not like a I'm going to screw your character up, but like repercussions. Repercussions that could make them be like, oh man, I really shouldn't have done that. I feel as a character, I have guilt, I have shame. I need to make this right. I think you can mess with it, but it's definitely an extra step. Again, if you can, yes, and because it's hard to have characters like meeting at the tavern and then, or like, basically your meet at the tavern, your meet cute of your characters, and then be like, aha, the call of adventure. It's like, well, all right, you guys continue to hang out at the tavern.
Right.
Not much of a story there.
Right. In order to play the game, and like games like Fate and other ones will say, this is a story about active heroes, who are, active, competent people. When they hear that something is wrong, they need to go and fix it. That I don't want to have to, in that kind of style game, have to super motivate my players to actually go on an adventure. I mean, you've got accepting the call to adventure in that sense is something the player does when the player sits down to play. Okay, we're going to be playing this, especially if the game master, especially if it's not as collaborative or as improv, and the game master has actually potentially gone to a lot of time in order to set up a game. Hey, look, we're going to do, this dungeon created this, whatever. How about accept the adventure and play what the game master has prepared for you?
You're all there to play.
Right.
You can refuse the call of adventure. You can do that, but I don't think it will be as fulfilling of a game if you do. If you want to maybe take that reluctant hero approach, because to kind of go back to Star Wars, like Luke didn't want to go anywhere. I mean, he was like, yeah, I'm fed up on being on this farm, but I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. And then, his whole family gets torched. Spoiler alert. And off he goes on space adventures. But like, he's very reluctant. He's like, is this really who I am? Is this really what I can do? I don't know. This is too much. This is so much. I got to go to a swamp about it. I think, and Aragorn's also a very good example of a reluctant hero, because he's like, hey, pick up the sword and be a friggin' king about it. And he's like, no, I don't know. If you want to refuse the call of adventure, again, you can. If you want to still be very true to your character, who wouldn't usually get mixed up in any of this crap kind of approach, reluctant hero is another really good direction you can go, and is very hero's journey Campbell. But really, if you accept that call to adventure, it really enriches that game, because your DM really wants to take you on an adventure.
Yes, go on the adventure. Of course,
yes.
we studied Luke Skywalker quite a bit when we were doing Star Wars here. And now, of course, there's a lot of information that, like, if you were going to start with just on a farm, which games do, there's still a lot of information that can be conveyed to the heroes and stuff for them to do before the great call for adventure goes out, which was, in that case, is Obi-Wan Kenobi saying you got to get off this planet.
Yeah, we got to go.
But it depends on how much time you want to spend in the character's ordinary world, or do you want to spend the time in the adventure? Probably you want to. Probably not all. You want to. Spend
I would imagine
the adventure.
Yeah, you've rolled some 6-sided dice about it. I imagine you want to be there. And I think that's kind of, and this was something we were talking a little bit about before we got on today. I think this kind of holds hands with that conundrum of, aside from your players, yes, anding you to hell and back, sometimes in a good way, mostly in a good way, but you're still just like, oh, cool, let's go. You also have players who they will make some very big choices, but also you have players that may have a change of heart along the way. Maybe they're not vibing on the original concept, or maybe they want to make a shift. We actually had a player recently in our game come to us and just say, like, look, the headspace I was in when I was working with this character, I'm just not in that headspace anymore. I'm in this place right now, and I really want to explore that. We were like, yeah, sure. Well, we'll make it work. And then, or you have a player exiting the game. How do you exit them in a way where if they want to come back, they can, because, life's going to life sometimes. Or how do you have them exit if they're not going to come back respectfully to that character? Like, these surprises from players that are completely normal and organic. But again, just to kind of go back to an earlier point, talk to your DM. We want to listen to you if there's a change. but like, how does that shift the game? How does that shift the structure? And where do you go from there?
This might lead into the point that James is making over here. I'm also looking at here. Here's one, the story point that I don't think I've ever had as a character in an RPG, and that is meeting the mentor. I'm trying to think of a time when my character had some type of mentor.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's often not mechanically necessary. Now, some I guess sometimes it is and played off screen. Like I'm thinking about early D&D where like you couldn't level up until you went back and trained. You know, you get the XP, but then you'd have to go back.
You need more training.
Like, need more training. But that's often done off screen anyway. And it may be that the person who's training you isn't like a really important NPC anyway. It could be, but it could also not be a real important NPC that you've got to deal with.
There was
having some type of mentor character is often not something in RPGs.
Yeah. There was a really interesting dynamic in the game that we had wrapped up in Company of the Compass. We had a character in there played by really talented player named John. He played this character named Lad. And Lad was essentially your chaotic good, hands on the hips hero. I always go off if I hear like someone calling for help, especially a damsel. Like very like Link, very Errol Flynn kind of hero. And he was a very young character. And what was interesting over the course of the game was like he has this concept of adventure. He's like, oh, I've read these books about Swift Jack Bellows, this amazing adventurer, and I'm going to go out and have adventures, and they're going to sing songs and write stories about me. It's going to be great. Campfires, taverns, ladies, awesome. And then this young man gets in with our group and we go on this adventure and he realizes, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So yeah, he's a hero. He's already answered a call to adventure, but he gets into it and it becomes about, oh my gosh, like really, how can I operate within this? Like being a hero, it's not as pretty as the books made it out to be. And then to hold hands with that, all of our characters, except for one, were like teenagers. So we all have these very altruistic, all these really big, colorful, broad strokes of an idea of what it's like to be on an adventure. But we had this one character who was like in his late 30s. And he became like the group's mentor, which was really weird. Like, so we had that mentor mechanic in our game where if our characters were like, oh my gosh, it's not supposed to be like this wizened, knowledgeable, paints more in those logical hues, like would come to our characters and be like, well, it's not like the books, and kind of guided our characters in a way. It was, I don't know, that might not be answering the question of like the conundrum of like, how do you answer a call if you're already a hero, or the mentor mechanic, but that was just something kind of interesting that fell into place in our last game pretty naturally and in a really weirdly organic way.
Well, like James is saying, like, for instance, honestly, I think the starting point here is to determine the type of story you're trying to tell for any given game. I'd argue the hero's journey are the minority for RPGs because your characters are already heroes. Right. This is a becoming. This isn't a becoming necessarily, though it can be.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at too, because I read your point a little bit earlier too, and I saw that and I was like, yeah, if they're already heroes and they want to go do it, like how do you mature that attitude from them in the game?
Well, see something like D&D, especially earlier editions where you start as, you know, where a level 1 guy is not as powerful as a level 1 guy is in 5th edition, so there's that. But there's also, when you start that low, it does seem to imply that, okay, you're starting from nowhere, starting from 0 and going to hero. Whether or not that's something stories actually do, Lou talks about. But you're starting from 0 and going to hero. Others don't. Something like Fate, you can start off as a hero. I'm a fan of the games where you can just start off and play Aragorn if you want to. I'm trying to play Aragorn or Faramir. I don't have to start at level 1, and then maybe this will actually be the game that goes on for 15 levels, and then I can be Aragorn at level 15 in 3 years.
Right.
I do also like the games where you start that, but that, there are things you can do, and Vogler talks about this and all that not every story is zero to hero like that. Indiana Jones, I mean, origin stories are popular right now.
Yeah.
But, if you just tell an Indiana Jones story, you just start with Indiana Jones, or you want to tell a Batman story once you've done the origin story. You're jumping in with Batman, but that does change the way that you use story beats. Often your mentors are different and things like that, but you still may structure it. Here's your, and then here's your threshold guardian is probably a big one in a lot of these.
Yeah.
When you're going from your equivalent of your act 1 into act 2, or from your character's ordinary world, whether that's a 0 level guy or you're all starting playing Indiana Jones, you receive a call and then go across some kind of threshold into some other space.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Sable's got a point here. The hero's journey is a coming of age story, and usually the goal is to go defeat some evil, gain some boon, and then bring that boon home. Most RPG adventures are most emphatically not that. And I agree. They definitely are a bit more amorphous than that. And I think they have to be by design, since you have so many people exploring your world. And again, that's where I'm kind of coming from too, where it's like, if you can have your ending in sight one way or another, I think that helps. And then it's kind of like, okay, how are the players going to get me to this ending? How am I going to get the players to this ending? With the last game we did, we had this BBG. We had to stop. And the way that one of the things that we did was he had these chalices that were in different temples. That we definitely were not inspired by Zelda at all, by the way, not at all. But he had these chalices in these different dungeons that, when destroyed, would actually siphon power away from him. And our kind of boon through the game was this compass that we put into the hands of one of the other players, because that bad guy happened to be his granddad. Compass points to what you're ultimately trying to get to. And so that dude was kind of our navigator to find these chalices and ultimately get to our big bad guy. And we defeat him, we head home. But what's really interesting is that the end of this game, our characters went on to, either live a peaceful life or keep going on adventures. But one of our characters, it became the start of his villain era. Like, he basically made it his call to villainy. And because it was something where he's like, well, Granddad, you are powerful, but you ultimately failed, and I won't. And then he just walks away. And that was like one of our last scenes in the game, where we were just like, oh my God. So it's like, yeah, it's that hero structure is really hard to apply specifically to a game, because it's just, you have to come in, like you were saying with Batman and Indiana Jones, you're established, that you want to, fight crime or fight evil, or that relic belongs in a museum, fighting Nazis kind of stuff. Like, you've already been doing that for a hot minute. And it's kind of like, cool, how do we just keep that propulsion going forward?
Let's see. But stories often start as farmers, but this is fine too. Like Sable says, like the hero's journey, a farmer is pretty lowly. So if you're going to go from 0 to something, being a farmer, but it doesn't have to be. Like Gygax's original conceptualization of what has now become known as an adventurer was a non-firstborn scion of minor nobility. You don't have a subsistence existence every day, but you're also not in line for inheritance. You're bored and young and have too much free time. What do? Go rob tombs and slay monsters. But I think the part about being bored is really important here, because I can see a story starting like that, which could be for a story for a book, novel, or movie, or RPG, where what's your everyday life is boring. Like, okay, so you're the fifth son of the Lord, or eighth son, or something like that, and your everyday life is not that great. So probably a willing hero to go out from there. So that does have those story beats in it, or can. Yeah.
No, that's essentially what Lad was. Is that, like, he was this athletic, you know, just ready to go on an adventure kind of character, and definitely that bored mentality of just like, I love where I live. This is great, but I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to see the world. I got to sow my oats or whatever, like for adventure. And off he went. And then my character was more like there was somebody who had cursed her and her village. Like, you know, she spot him doing mischief in the woods kind of shit. It turned out it was our big bad. That was our other character's granddad. And she had to find him to break her curse. So she had more of a propulsion to leave her village, even though she friggin' loved it there. So you have all these different characters. One who's like, I need to go for the sake of going and for the sake of a story. And my dog has something to say too. That's a good point. Good job. But yeah, I think I sort of started talking on it and then I lost it because she surprised me.
Building off what you were saying, though, you said something. I was thinking about the relationship between what are we doing here as far as collaborative storytelling versus what are we doing versus playing a game. So collaborative story versus a game. So we talk about
the game is the vehicle for the story kind of thing.
Well, when we talk about story, we can talk about structure and we can talk about these different things that may or may not be present in all different forms and things like that. So if you sit down and you tell a collaborative story together, well, in order to make your story better, you probably include more story beats and things like that that are known. But if you talk about game structure, a game could be, well, Hero Quest, or I got all kinds of games down here that are obstacles that you're overcoming in order to see whether or not you can overcome the obstacles, which is different from the objective of a story. And so we talk about the relationship between the narrative side of things, the gamist side of things, and the simulationist. Some people will be much more simulationist about their approach to an RPG. And if you're trying to put together like a game, which is, hey, raid this dungeon, a lack of story structure for that, it may not be surprising and it may not be necessary.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends on what game you want to run. Forgive me. By the way, she is a Plothound Pitbull mix, and her name is Matilda. And she has a tooth that sticks out like this. But since someone asked, but there was an earlier point about there we go. Plothound Pit mix, Matilda. There was something earlier about know what game you want to run or know what game story you want to tell. If you want to tell a story and have it be, like you were saying, that circumstantial, that we're here to tell a story. If there happens to be math and dice and dungeons and or dragons about it, cool. But if you want to just play the game and do the dungeons or do the modules, and maybe there's some RP about it along the way, or maybe there's some connection about it along the way, it's a perfectly viable game structure too. But it just depends on what game you want to play, because some people do lean more towards that technicality over the storytelling aspect, and some people lean the other way. I love doing story-based stuff, and if there happens to be the technicality along the way, great. But I think you can tell, because like I'll still see people that I played board games with forever ago. Like I remember playing Arkham Asylum like forever ago. I think that's what it's called, Arkham Asylum or Arkham Knight. It's a Lovecraft board game. It's 500 hours long. But we almost won, and we still talk about it. We still talk about it to this day, where it's like, do you remember you just had to win by 1 point? You didn't. I'm like, that wasn't my fault. That was the dice. But we still talk about it the same way that, people talk about a story they've read. So it's interesting, the kind of yin and yang of it.
DVG makes a great point. A hero can be called into action and still be competent. He comes up with another great example, which is John Wick. John Wick has a very dramatic call to action. His refusal was wrapped up in his old life. His sledgehammer is his acceptance. He verbally says so about third act. So there's another example of a hero that is that starts off is not going 0 to hero. We talked about John Wick specifically.
I also think about Carradine in Kung Fu, who's like, I don't want to fight you. I won't fight you. And then finally he's like, oh, like finally he just gets pushed like to that point. And I think John Wick's a great example of that too. That was a really good point. I think that's a really great way of looking at it.
Yeah, and that's why I like the ability to create the lower level heroes, but I also like the systems where it's very easier to create high level heroes, especially if there's no. That's why I tend to like the session focused ideas, because there's no guarantee that you're actually sitting there. I mean, it's unlikely that you're actually sitting there on a multi-year campaign. I mean, most campaigns are not that, but I like putting focus on the session to make sure that we got to make this session as great as possible. And sometimes that means starting with more competent heroes.
Yeah. I think, knowing what your boundaries are, what you want, and where you want to kind of grow from as a DM with your story, it's so important. It really is. And it also just creates stability and consistency for your players too.
The story in John Wick, we talked about. There's a whole discussion with Doug on John Wick is actually in my opinion, John Wick is the epilogue to Beauty and the Beast. So John Wick is the reason that it works so well is because you already know the story of John Wick, which is the story of Beauty and the Beast, and this is the epilogue. What happens if Belle is killed? What happens if somebody murders Belle after the story of Beauty and the Beast? What happens?
I'm going to go kill the whole village.
That's exactly what John Wick does. So John Wick is that.
I love that. That's so cool. I honestly wouldn't have made that jump, but now that I'm hearing it, I'm like, yeah.
I did a whole conversation with Doug. If you look up
That's
John
great.
Wick on
I
the channel,
have to go back and find that. That's cool.
So the Sable Phoenix says one audience. So Sable Phoenix was talking about the difficulty in the improv if people are expecting different kinds of games. I guess this isn't the importance of session zero. So it sounds like you have very improv heavy group that you play in.
I do, but we were very careful to say in the beginning, especially with this new game, of just going to our players and being like, hey, what sort of game are you looking for? Are you looking for something that's going to lean really heavy into that session by session aspect of we're going to the dungeon, we're going back to town, we're going to the dungeon, we're going back to the campfire, that sort of thing? Are you looking for that more technical classic base, or are you looking for something more interactive? Do you want storylines? Do you want the consequences of actions, character development, character arcs, the whole thing? And just kind of seeing what they were expecting as players and kind of building off of that. And we found that there's a pretty big mix match in our group. They were leaning a bit more to that storytelling aspect, to improving with each other and interacting with each other. I think there was one session where I just got to kind of sit back and watch because they were just back and forth. And it wasn't for the whole session, honestly. That'd be, I don't know about that. I'd be like, am I doing my job right now? Am I doing it well? But yeah, I mean, you've got to build that baseline and kind of keep going from there. I agree though. You've with what you were saying in the comment, but also to your end, Heath. Yeah, we're mostly an improv group, and it's sort of evolved into that, even though there was that want for we want more storylines. That I think because the players had never played together before, they were like, do we talk now? I'm like, yeah. But now there'll be 5 or 6 minute dialogue sessions between these players, and whoever's DMing in that story arc can just kind of hang out. Those moments on, somebody had mentioned Critical Role before, those moments on Critical Role where Matt's just kind of doing this and looking between the players that are talking and just every now and then sip and just kind of keeps watching them. But yeah.
We got about 15 minutes left.
Oh, wow.
To go off of the structure topic, something else that you brought up, you were talking about headspace with characters and things like that. What is your experience with the relationship between, like, with your groups, the way that you guys play, between the player and the character, especially if it's an improv heavy kind of game.
Ooh, there's a lot of trust. You've really got to trust each other, and especially if you're in a group you don't know, that's a tall order. Headspace, I try to be really careful about avoiding the good old fashioned, well, it's what my character would do. To a certain extent, yeah, there are things that this is what my character would do. But I think that the way we kind of found our way around that as players in our headspaces and players in our characters' headspaces is there was a lot of dialogue at the table where there was like one decision we had to make in one of the last games. And I was like, okay, I know what Nessa would do, but Rachel as a player really needs to bounce this off you guys right now. And, you know, and of course there's the call and answer. It's what my character would do. It's like, well, then if it's what your character would do. I think it's important. Like, you know how like you did the deep breaths at the beginning of the game of our conversation. I think that's also another good way to kind of just get focused and dialed in to make sure you're not betraying that character's headspace and that you're still an autonomous player. Like, yes, this is my character. This is how they behave, but I really don't want to overlap people at the table. I really want to keep that communication going with my fellow players when I'm in the player seat. Be like, hey, this is kind of her headspace right now. Where are you guys at? Like, I don't know if that kind of tips the hand a bit or, you know, breaks that fourth wall, but I'd rather communicate with my other players if I'm on the player side of things than just assume, oh, well, my character would do this. So, and I might still do it, but we're going to talk about it first. Yeah, some people do that, some don't.
Sable says the player is not the character, and the edge of the table is the dividing line. Whatever happens inside that circle cannot influence your response outside of it, or the group will inevitably implode. Whatever happens inside of that circle cannot influence your response outside of it.
I'll agree and disagree with that. I think, though, that it just depends on your players. Like, if you're part of a group that likes to kind of like bounce things off each other, going outside of that expectation of like, well, it's on the table, so it might not go over well. But if y'all already understand that rule and it's the expectation of the game, yeah, you're right. But again, it's communication at the end of the day. Like, there are some groups I've been with where, yeah, it starts and stops at the edge of the table. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it, by the way. There are lots of groups I've been with that are a part of that. And like after the game, someone's like, hey, sorry, my character did that. I'm like, whatever. Like, I'll roll with it. Shit. But then there are other groups that are just like, hey, before I do this, I kind of want to bounce it off the group. I know we have an end goal here for this session, whether that's to get the boon and go home or, you know, to save the farmer's daughter or whatever. You know, so what are we doing here? And yes, communication is part of being an adult. And I don't think there's such a thing as too much communication, especially when you have people who have put a lot of time and a lot of heart into their character and making time for this game. Everybody wants to have a good time, and knowing what the expectations are really helps with that.
Yeah, it seems like some people that I talk to seem to use their characters to work out different aspects about themselves.
Yeah, I did that with one of mine. Yeah.
You know, really? Okay, so that's not really something that I have experience with.
Okay,
but
I didn't mean to cut you off, though. By the way, keep going, and I'll.
Oh no, I want you to explore that because that's just not something that I do a lot, but I hear or do. Yeah. But I hear people do that, and so that's a different relationship between the character and the player.
It's actually the first time I've done that. I've never really made a character to kind of like flesh out something I was working on. That's very much something that I personally would do, whether with my therapist or with journaling or with like somatic or shadow work, et cetera, buzzword. That's on me. I try not to bleed that into the game so much because the game is where you can escape from that work. Sometimes you do need to disengage. It's so important to do that work on your own. but it's also really important to disengage and give yourself a break because it is really hard work to work on yourself. But for me, so that's why I usually don't do it. But for me, with this one character I did in the last game, I was in a pretty dark place. I won't get too deep into it because it's not that kind of show. But I was in a kind of a dark place where I was just like, man, like, I mean, I am I a good person? And how can I really explore that and lean into that and study that in a way that's not scary? And I did that with this last character, and I just played her good. Like, if someone tried to bribe her, no. If if there was some temptation to evil, like she would like fight it tooth and nail. If someone needed something, she would help them. If there was somebody that was getting wronged and she had to bend a rule here or there to do it, she would. But for the most part, chaotic good across the board, or some lesser, maybe a little lower than true chaotic good. That was Lad. That was his department. But I had so much fun exploring this character that stood up for her beliefs, that stood up for the people she loved, and that fought for herself. There were a lot of punishments she faced along the way in the game, just naturally as conflicts come up. And she overcame them in a brilliant way that involved not just her being strong for herself, but leaning on her friends. And it taught me a lot. Coming out of that game, it taught me a lot. So it was a good experience. But I probably wouldn't do it again. Because it was very challenging at times. I was like,
I think that what James there says, in a therapist's office, role-playing can be an excellent catharsis. In a game where no one else is prepared for that, is likely prepared for that, use caution.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're looking at Reddit or something like that, and you're looking at like people are writing about like game implosions, or group implosions that didn't go well, that's often one of the things you see that's like, okay, so we're all sitting here, and apparently one of these players is basically using the game for their therapy.
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden all this stuff came out, and the relation and it did not go well often. So
yeah.
You have to be careful of that.
Yeah. No, the goal was to learn something from Nessa. And I absolutely cherish that character. And it is very important to still remember you're playing a character in a game that has a very heavy Murphy's Law built into it with the dice. So you do have to be ready. If you roll poorly or the bad guys roll better, you got to be ready. And that was something I went in knowing would be a thing. And it was just like, I've got to, be ready in case this happens. I think a massive helicopter just flew overhead. Excuse me.
Yank your power off, right?
Right. They're coming for me. They went from your place to my place. They're on their way. But yeah, I would say that, you can learn a lot from your characters. And if you do ever want to do a study with your character, you can, like you were saying, that it can be an excellent catharsis. In fact, there are a lot of therapists that have started using D&D as a therapy tool with sobriety and addiction and overcoming trauma. I think it can be great for that. But you're absolutely right. You do need to be careful. You do need to remember how your game works, and just have those emotional contingencies in place. Have that pint of ice cream standing by, man, so you can cuddle up to it if it goes wrong.
Dungeon Master says, don't put too much of yourself in your. I mean, that's a great point. It's like playing with Crygor, Paladin, and Gabriel. But you're right. And of course, different game systems have different levels of randomness. But yeah, you might not want to do that when we're playing Roll Master. You can get your head cut off like that.
Right.
So
I've got a friend from another RPG who oh God.
I'm having every problem today.
Well, you've got that. I've got Matilda losing her mind as the armies of Alabama power advance. No, I've got a friend who they're in a game and they're just like, oh my gosh, if this character ever died, I would never know what to do with myself. I'm like, that's probably not great. I would have a backup character in mind and care about them as well. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, Jack Ryan, I have got like 2 or 3 characters pretty standard on deck whenever I play a game for exactly that reason.
DBJ says, yeah, I was punched in the eye, fractured orbital socket due to a serious failure in an RPGs back in my teens. Whoa.
Jesus, that is toxic. I'm glad you're okay now. That's awful. I'm sorry that happened to you. Can you imagine like someone just flipping a D&D table and just
Well, what do you have? Do you have concluding thoughts, or how should we wrap this up?
You know, I just yeah, I think kind of the biggest takeaway is like it's really good to know your story rules. It's really good to go in with an idea for your game and see what your players want. Communication is key. You know, try for my approach, I try to have a basic structure just to like kind of keep people from going too far off and out of orbit. But I really love the way players can tell a story when they have room to do that and to communicate and to bounce their ideas off of you. Like they're going to do most of the writing work for you in the end in their own way. You know, have your goals in mind, have your boundaries in mind, communicate, and just see what story y'all can tell together if you're going at that approach. And if you are going at the approach of, you know, murder hobos going into dungeons and coming home about it and getting XP, that's okay too, as long as you're having fun.
DSL Frontman says, this has been lovely and entertaining. I look forward to rewatching the beginning that I missed. So yeah, this is great. Of course, I like to be able to run the morning show by myself so that I can always have the morning show here. But as we're starting to kind of change things up, this is episode 281 of the morning show. So some things that work, some things that don't work, and the conversations in the morning really work very well. So that could be conversation with the chat, though of course, we've had great conversation with the chat here, but also I think having a guest on from time to time is also a great idea for conversations, broader conversations, and potentially lighter conversations than what happens on Table Talk sometimes. Like, you know, we go deep in Table Talk, and like we went in. How many hours did we spend dissecting Star Trek 3? I think Doug and I did 5.5 hours.
Wow.
Going through Star Trek 3. That's so the
y'all are a bunch of nerds, and I love
it. That's what people were saying in the chat and stuff like that. So this was 6 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours.
Wow.
Like that.
Oh
and
man.
You want to know something ironic? Okay, or something horrible that I realized also happened to me this morning when the power went out. I was uploading. Like I said, I've been jamming my entire internet up trying to move things over to the new Table Talk channel. And that episode, that discussion was the one that was being uploaded. So that's a 5.5 or 6 hour long video. And it was at 86% complete when we started this. And now it's gone.
Oh no.
Start that over.
Oh no! You know, it's interesting. We had a creative writing class forever ago. We had to write a whole draft up. We brought it in, and he was like, "Cool." And then he threw all of them in the garbage, and he was like, "Write it again." And we all came out with like a much more consolidated, cleaner draft. So maybe these, like, you know, at the back of the brain, those conversation points are still there, and they'll just come out like Shakespeare.
Well, no,
time.
I still have. Well, fortunately, I still have the file.
Oh,
but
good.
The hours
good.
and hours of uploading, like that one has been uploading because it's such a big file for like 8 hours, and I just lost all of that upload time. So I got to start the upload again.
Oh
At least
gosh,
I
get it
forgot
now.
the conversation.
I'm caught up. I see what you
conversation.
were saying now. I hate that for you, but it'll get there.
Well,
yeah.
Right. So let me bring these. I'll bring these up, and then I'll let you tell people where to find you.
Sure.
So if you are coming in here, the Table Talk, please do. This is the new. Oh, and I just hit the wrong button again. I'm shuffling around some of our shows so that we can be more focused on individual channels. I'm still going to be broadcasting Table Talk on this one, at least for a while. We'll see how things go, because I can simultaneously broadcast. I can simultaneously broadcast to 2 different channels now, which is not something I could do like last year or something. But the Table Talk channel, please do come over to the Table Talk channel. There's going to be clips over there that are going up. There's and all kinds of things. So if you please do subscribe to Table Talk right over there. And then also there is going to be a dedicated dinner and a board game channel as well. So dinner and a board game. So click there, and then that will be the new dinner and a board game channel. And then also, if you want to get in on online gaming starting in September, I guess we'll please sign up right there, and also share this link. So this is online gaming interest sign up. share this link, sign up there on the forum, let other people know who you might want to play with and who you know would be good to have in sort of this virtual online gaming community, so that we've got lots of people who could run different games and do a lot of gaming there and play some of the games that we might not otherwise be able to play operating in the physical world. All right. So, Rachel, where can everybody find you if they are interested in following more?
Yeah, I've actually got my handle in my name. You can follow me on Instagram at YesChefMarshall. That's usually where I'm posting my shenanigans or upcoming things, and that's a good spot to find me. Otherwise, hopefully, I'll see you guys again for some more coffee, or maybe we'll do a deep dive at some point. And yeah, or play some games.
Well, yep, I think all three of those.
Awesome.
All right. Everybody have a wonderful day. Oh, what is this? This is Tuesday? Is this Tuesday?
Tuesday, yeah.
So Doug and I are doing a deep dive on Star Trek V tonight. So Star Trek V tonight, I got to make up the thumbnail for that, 7:00 p.m. Central Time. That's Table Talk. So we're going to be doing Star Trek V tonight, 7:00 p.m. So I will see everybody for that. And then I'll see everybody in the morning for the next morning grind. Until then, everybody be creative, be constructive, and grind on.